Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Startup Operator. Today we have Snehanshu Gandhi, who is co-founder of Sorted AI. You might know them more popularly by their app, Kaga Scanner, which was praised by the Prime Minister in his Man Ki Baat address. We'll be talking to him about his founding journey and how he plans to scale the business. Welcome Snehanshu, thank you for making the time.
Good to be here, Roshan. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, fantastic. So maybe to begin things off, why don't you just give us a brief about your personal journey? I noticed that you're a two-time founder.
Yeah, in fact, 3 times. The first one is kind of So I'm an engineer, as normally you have founders in India, from IIT Bombay. Back in 2007, graduated. During my college days, 2006, like my final year, was my first startup stint. It was called India Interns. It was a internship slash gig gig work kind of opportunities for students. Okay. Started it in 2006. Did that for a year while I was still in college. Things didn't go very well, and decided to take up the job. Moved to a consulting firm called INI Consulting, a boutique firm in Bombay. Did that for about three and a half years. As part of that, the consulting job, there was another startup that the promoters were starting called INI Farms. Was the first person to join the team for INI Farms, which is basically a horticulture business, growing pomegranates and exporting them. So did that for about a year and a half with them. Set up their initial first farm, did the business plan for the project, etc. And then moved to ISB Hyderabad, 2011-12. Did my postgrad from there. After that, I was in Indonesia for about 3.5 years, working in, again, agri sector, working in a palm oil company there called Good Hope Asia. Came back to India in 2015, October of 2015, to start my second startup called TapMe, which was a home services business focused on maintenance services in tier 2 cities. And did that for 4 years. A bunch of things in between, like started as a B2C business, pivoted to B2B after 3 years, did that all together for 4 years from 2015 to 2019. And moved on to Sorted AI Kagas in 2019. And that's been what we've been doing for a year now.
Okay. What are some of the learnings from your previous founding journeys that you're applying to this startup at this point of time?
Bunch of them. First, of course, was starting from the first attempt long back to TapMe, and then now. One of the things was understanding the importance of having a good team, and making sure that within the founding team you have a great bonding between the three of you, or like in our case it's three, but within the founding team, the kind of bonding that matters is something that I learned over the two previous startups. And that's why Sorted AI is with the same team who we did together TapMe for 4 years, and we decided to do Sorted AI as well together. Gaurav and Tamanjeet were my co-founders here. Operationally learned a lot of things, especially with TapMe experience. Did that for 4 years, and it was a very operational business. I mean, providing home services to people where you have like 200 plus technicians working in 4 different cities, and kind of managing that with a 50-member team. Learned a lot of things. Applying it here in the sense that first was we did not want to be in an operational business again, like core operational business. Wanted to do a pure tech business this time, just from the fact that scalability is very, very different when you're doing a pure tech business versus a tech supported operations business, which was what TapMe was. Another important thing for me has been learning from TapMe primarily is without cracking the product market fit in some sense, you just don't want to start scaling immediately. That's the mistake that we did at TapMe. Started scaling up very quickly. Like within first 9 months, we were present in 3 different cities, and trying to manage a 30-40 member team. which is very consciously we've not done this time. So till now we're still a 4-member team, 3 founders and 1 employee on the team. So consciously being doing that we want to be sure of what the product direction is, and then we'll scale, and then we'll get the team, etc.
Yeah, so I've operated very, very briefly in the home services space, and I can totally relate to the madness of, people not showing up in time at some 400 appointments that you scheduled, and customers calling you for one speck of dirt that was somehow missed, and people not paying in time. Oh my God. I mean, it's just so operations intensive that yeah, I mean, you're just totally turned off by that experience, right? I mean, there's this, yeah.
It was fun. It was fun, definitely. But running an operations business, which is also specifically like home services, where the service standardization doesn't exist. It takes a lot of effort to standardize those things, and it's a very, very people-dependent business. I mean, you're dependent on your. So a lot of variables that become challenging to manage.
Yeah. And I don't know what it is about founders though, I mean, every founder that I've met always wants to start up again, right? Despite, whatever kind of experience they've had, like 99% of them, that I've spoken to always wants to start up again and again.
Right. So whenever I get this question, the analogy that I have in mind for myself, and that's how it works for me, is, and anyone who's a runner, long distance runner would understand this. Whenever you're running a marathon, you go through different emotional phases within a marathon of like 40 kilometers or 20 kilometers, whatever you're running. You go through a lot of emotional ups and downs within that period. And almost always you will hit a point in that journey where you will be like, why am I doing this to myself? And that's exactly what entrepreneurship feels like. There'll be times when you feel like, why am I doing this to myself? I should better go and get a job, earn some good money, have a easy life there. But then again, the moment your journey is completed, whatever the end is, I mean, you finished first or you finished last in your marathon, you still want to start up again, because once the run is complete, you feel like, next time I want to do it better and I want to try it again. So it's kind of a runner's high for me, that I want to just look at something new next time. And once you've done it, like once, another thing that I felt for myself is you start seeing a lot of different problems in your daily lives from a very different angle, where you're looking for solutions. And start looking at everything like that, you'll eventually find something which you think, this is a solution that I can build. And then you start exploring, and you end up doing it again.
Yeah, it's like the red pill, man. I mean, you just look at everything from a different mindset, right? I mean, from a different perspective. Couple of things you also mentioned that I want to pick up on. One is this really striving for product market fit, we find that, people are too keen to just push it forward really hard, sort of artificially, even, when they don't really have that product market fit as such. So A, how do you know that, you should put gasoline on that fire at this point of time? And B, how would you advise people start doing it?
So one thing, I mean, PMF is a very hot topic. A lot of people have written about it, and there are a bunch of good articles that you can read up on. One of the things that we've felt doing, this one and the previous one, is you start getting the pull from the users, and that's when you start feeling that, okay, now people are asking for your product, and they're downloading it on their own. And along with that, what will also come is a lot of criticism, a lot of feedback, that your product doesn't do this well, the product is I want this feature more. Even those things, it may look negative, that people are rating you 1 star, or you're giving you feedback which is that your product is not good. But that's a good sign of product market fit, that people want your product. And you just need to figure out that these issues have to be addressed. But there is clearly a sign of product market fit, that people want this product, and that's why they want it to improve so that they can use it better in their lives. So that's one thing that we've learned in I mean, there are a bunch of other things that tell you that you're moving towards that, but that's when you start feeling that, okay, now I think I have got a product market fit going there.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I always tell my team, right? I mean, it's when your customers are not saying anything, when it's good or bad, that's when that's when you really have to be scared.
Right.
Yeah. So the other thing you mentioned is this whole marathon, right? And I've come to the realization, no matter what kind of startup you're running, I think it's a 10-year journey, right? At least to begin with. So how do you sort of pace yourself? Because you feel like as a founder, you're living and dying every day, every hour, right? So how do you sort of pace yourself to make the 10-year journey?
So, I mean, I have not completed the 10-year yet with one of my startups, but how I feel is that, you know, the overall ecosystem around, startups and founders is very, I would say, I mean, the kind of glamour and the kind of things that are getting talked about in media are very distracting for founders.
Yeah.
That, you get distracted that, okay, so and so has raised so much money, I should also raise it. You may not have reached the stage where you should be raising that much money, and you should not be worried about that. If you start getting worried about things like these, that, okay, someone has raised money, I should also raise, or I've been doing it for a year, I should raise now, now is the time to raise, etc., is when you start getting distracted and you start becoming stressed about, things not moving in the direction. And that's kind of pacing that you need to have, that when you hit the right stages, and that's when you start pushing on your growth, etc., or think about these things. Till that time, so as I said, in terms of getting a team in place, we were very conscious this time that we will be building the first version of the product ourselves. We will be taking it out to the market ourselves. We'll market it ourselves. We are not going to hire anyone for anything. So be it our digital marketing, be it our back-end coding, be it front-end design, everything, first almost year was done by the three of us. That meant that Gaurav needed to learn a lot more about, my co-founder needed to learn a lot more about digital marketing. He did that. It meant I needed to pick up, front-end coding, which I used to do back in college. I did that. Taman anyway was techie. He was doing what he knew best anyway. But we made sure that we don't hire someone for like these things, and pace ourselves that we do not have funding. We are bootstrapped. I mean, we raised a little in the last few months, but when we started, we did not have any external funding, and we bootstrapped it to make sure that we don't have any expenses. We made sure everything was done by us, and that's the kind of pacing that I feel should be something that people should try out in the initial days, and not run after that, okay, I should start hiring and funding will happen, because those are the mistakes that we did in previous startup. We hired thinking that funding will happen and you will grow, and we have to grow very fast and all of that, but we burnt out ourselves much sooner.
Right.
So this time it is very, very conscious that we want to pace it out in that sense, that when we are ready, then we get to these steps.
Right. Yeah, sort of grow organically in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about your founding story with Kaga Scanner. BizStone has this quote that says, timing, perseverance, and about 10 years of trying will eventually make you look like an overnight success, right? People are calling you an overnight success these days, and you've only taken 2 years for that, of really slogging your butts off, right? So what does it feel like to be an overnight success?
So that's what one thing that we discussed within our team as well, that our overnight success is at least 5 years old. Our entrepreneurship journey started 5 years back. And of course, it was a different startup earlier. But as an entrepreneur, the story started 5 years back. And now is where it looks like it's an overnight success. Within this product itself, within this startup itself, we've spent more than a year in this already. So, timing, of course, is one thing definitely that is very important. You call it timing, you call it luck, is an important element of the success that most startups get. You can do a lot of things, but these are some of the things that are not really in our control. What we can do is be ready for an opportunity that comes, and that's what happened with Kagaz. So the big moment for Kagaz was the Chinese app ban. That happened on 29th of June. But Kagaz was not something that we built for that. We had been building Sorted AI, which was our first product, rolled it out. The MVP was rolled out in March of 2019 before even the company was registered. We rolled out the first version of the app in July of 2019. November was a major change in the product strategy for Sorted AI, November 2019. Did try a bunch of different things, and scanner was something that we first thought about in January of 2019, that maybe we should build a scanner. And maybe in the conversation we'll come to why we thought about it, from Sorted AI to building a scanner. But eventually we decided to build it, that, okay, this looks like a way where we could get users interested, or an organic way of getting to our users as a scanner in their daily lives, managing their documents and other information, and then slowly get them to the AI elements that we've been building in Sorted AI for over a year. Because when we just try to sell the AI and document management, no one's interested. But scanning, everyone is, because it's a natural part of their day-to-day lives, scanning documents, sharing. But organizing documents is not something that people are excited about, which was what Sorted AI was trying to do. So that's how we thought about building the scanner. Launched it in June, around 15th of June, and then the ban happened, and we just started pushing the product out. So we would say timing was not in our control, but we were ready with the product. We were ready with how to grow this, and the first version of the product was nowhere close to what we would have ideally wanted to. It was nowhere close to this kind of scale initially. It was not meant to be scaled that quickly. It was, in a sense, it was an MVP, or like a first version of the product, which we had rolled out, and we thought, we'll, like all the products that we do, we roll it out, we'll get some feedback, and we'll improve, and slowly we'll get to a stage where this is a good product. So when we rolled it out, it was more of a first version product. But then we saw the opportunity and the initial traction that we got. We made sure that our first update was out within 3 hours of the ban happening. The moment we saw the scale coming, we knew there are things that are not going to, that are going to break with that scale. In 3 hours, we rolled out our first update. And then since then, almost every week or 10 days, we've been rolling out an update. Making sure that, there are issues in the product, but we'll solve all of them, and making sure that all our customers are aware that it's not, and we accepted that we are not the best product right now, but we want to build the best. And if we get the support, we'll continue to build it. And we made sure that we, delivered on the promises that we made to our customers. So in that sense, the overnight success is, perseverance and being ready for an opportunity, keep trying. And whenever the moment comes, at that point, you just, go all out and make sure that you can make the best of it.
Yeah. Again, I can't agree more with you, right? Success is when, opportunity meets preparation, and that latter part is super important. You have this Shark Tank effect and Oprah effect where, you mentioned, and the demand for your product goes up overnight, right? And it really is up to you on how you capitalize that. So, talk to us about that experience. Okay, now you see that the apps are like the Chinese apps are banned. By the way, the Cam Scanner app, which was, I think, one of your main competitions, their experience was so shitty, man. It was like, I think you had an advantage in that, in some sense, I would say, because I have used the Cam Scanner app myself, and it was a horrendous experience. Like, so there are multiple UX problems it had. It was not a seamless flow, and in fact, I had actually made a mark that maybe someday I should build a cam scanner app, right? But I never got around to it. See, which is why, I mean, you need that preparedness for something like this, right? So,
Right, right.
so you see that June 29th, the Chinese apps are banned. What is your first instinct? So what do you tell your co-founders, and then what is the plan of action from there on? I mean, were you seeing that peak
No,
of downloads?
So at that point, like when the ban was announced, I was having dinner, and I got a call from one of my family members saying that who knew that we have built a scanner already. I mean, till that time we had only about 800 to 1,000 users in the first 15 days or so. So one of the family members called up and said the Chinese apps have been banned. And I said, okay, I did not see that. I just switched on the TV to see the news coming out there. And then immediately we had a call between the three of us, the three founders, and we discussed that we need to push. We need to immediately push. What do? We create a nice message saying that the Chinese apps have been banned. Here's a great Indian alternative for Cam Scanner, and you can use it. And we just rolled it out on WhatsApp groups. Immediately on all our WhatsApp groups. We did not do much on social media other than like WhatsApp. Immediate focus was to push a message across into all our WhatsApp groups, because we've learned that WhatsApp works amazing. I mean, if you can do that viral loop on WhatsApp, the kind of reach it can get you is amazing.
Yeah.
So we did that. And honestly, at that point also, we were not expecting this is going to go like shoot up so rapidly. Then a bunch of things happened in the night itself. And WhatsApp message, we don't know how it reached to someone. And one of the influencers on Twitter got this message from somewhere. They picked it up and tweeted about it. And this influencer had more than 700,000, 800,000 followers on Twitter. And immediately we have like more than 10,000 likes on the tweet and about 8,000 retweets. And suddenly the WhatsApp loop is already working, and the Twitter is also started. And in the morning when we get up, we are already 35,000 downloads, and it's growing very fast. And by the end of 24 hours, we had already hit 100K downloads from like 1,000 to 100K in 24 hours. Or practically 0 to 100K. So that was crazy, and we did not expect it to shoot up like that. But yeah, that's the power of virality and some sense product market fit, etc.
Yeah, no, very few people get to experience that, right? I mean, kudos to you guys. You were able to experience that and also leverage that as well.
Really sorry for the interruption. I'm just going to take a minute of your time to talk to you about something amazing. Move fast, break things. All of that is great advice for when you have nothing to lose. But once you have some base of users and customers, you cannot really afford to risk quality. So how do you still ship at lightning pace and delight your users and customers at the same time? Now that's where Bagasura comes in. Bagasura is a super easy way for people to give and take feedback about the product, and most importantly, close the loop. If you work in a design team, you know screenshots suck. But with Bagasura, you can actually get people to give you very contextual and accurate feedback about your UI and your UX. If you work in a QA team, you know 90% of your time goes in reproducing bugs. But with Bagasura, you can get people to reproduce bugs, document test cases, and resolve things all within Jira itself. Bagasura is being used by some of the leading design and QA teams around, and it's brought to you by the good folks at Mulya Testing, which is one of the best software and QA firms in the world. Do check out bagasura.io, that's BUGASURA.io, and sign up for a demo today. Ship fast and ship well.
Leverage that as well. So this whole Atmanirbhar Bharat movement as such, right? Building in India, for India, or for the world as such.
Right.
How do you plan to keep that movement going in some sense?
So that's actually one of the things that made us build the scanner also when we did it in June. as I said, the first thought of building a scanner was back in January, and we did not act on it till June. That's where around that period is when the Atmanirbhar Bharat and Vocal for Local call was made by the Honorable Prime Minister. And we thought, CAM scanner is also Chinese. We can't find a good Indian alternative. Let's make one. And it was, in a sense, inspired by that we started building it at that time. And the whole idea of having Atmanirbhar Bharat and Vocal for Local has also helped us a lot in terms of the scale that we've been able to achieve. That people are very conscious about these things today. They are very conscious that they want to use something Indian and give opportunity to Indian entrepreneurs to build products out. So we want to definitely focus on making sure that is our that we contribute towards that. The other thing that we've also, and it is independent of the movement, but in our product experimentation and understanding about our user behavior, one thing that we figured was that in India right now there are more than 50 crore 500 million users on internet and getting to a digital life. Out of that, 80% of the users have come to internet very recently. Like Geo revolution happened and people started getting to internet. And the other important characteristic that we've seen of this Bharat user that we've been calling is that they are mobile only users. They're not mobile first user or a desktop user like you and I have been. They're mobile only. They don't even have a desktop or a laptop. Everything is on the phone. And this audience needs tools. This audience needs apps, utility apps. Their way of functioning is very different. They don't want an desktop app adapted to a mobile environment. That doesn't work for them. So it is a very different kind of audience that we are targeting and building products for them. And that's where Atmanirbhar Bharat comes in, that this is the Bharat that's going to come, be contributing to the economy in next, let's say decade, in the next decade. And for that economy, for that Bharat user, we need to have tools which are made for this Bharat user. And that can be done in India by Indians. And that's what we want to focus on. We have a bunch of other product ideas that we want to bring in. After the scanner, we're looking at a cloud storage solution coming in very soon for the people who are using scanner and then putting up stuff on cloud, and then bring in more features like that. So that's how we see Atmanirbhar Bharat, that there is a large segment of Indian users for which products have never been built. And this is what Atmanirbhar Bharat would require, that we have to build products for them. Apps is one part of it. Of course, there will be other parts, but that is where we see, we contributing towards that.
Right. No, as I'm hearing you speak, I'm really thrilled to see the level of thinking that has gone into it, right? You're talking about nuances of your users and so on. And that's also particularly why I don't believe that businesses can essentially be copied, right? People have this old spiel, right? I think it's pretty dated right now, but people used to say, oh, Flipkart was an Amazon copy, or, Ola was an Uber copy and stuff like that. But I don't know. If you were there around that time, there were 8 or 10 businesses that tried to copy that, right? But it was hardcore execution that made the companies what they are.
After the ban was announced, there were at least 10-15 scanner apps that came after that. The moment the ban was announced, there were at least 15 more scanner apps which either call themselves as CAM scanner itself. There are a bunch of them which call themselves Kaga scanner also. And then there are many others. But the important part is, in that sense, building a basic scanner is commoditized. It's not a very high-tech product, but the product thinking that goes behind it is where we differentiate, and that's where we'll be able to differentiate in future. The idea for us is not to just build a plain simple scanner. And within scanners also, as you said, your experience with CAM scanner, similarly, if you try out different products, the experience, so everyone can give you an option to click a picture, crop it, and make a PDF out of it. but eventually the output and the whole experience is very different at each different app. And that's where the product thinking comes in, and that's where you start differentiating. So when the ban happened, there were 15 other products that we were competing with. Today, practically, I mean, no one is there in that scale bracket that we've been able to reach, because consciously worked on things from that perspective. And it was not something that we launched just because there was a ban. It was anyway part of our product roadmap. We had launched it before the ban. So we had a lot more thinking behind it. And that's where we are able to differentiate. And that's where we'll be able to create our own space. Even let's say tomorrow CamScanner comes back, we'll be able to create our own space and make sure that our users like us for what we do.
Right. So let's talk about some of the use cases, right? I know that you started Sorted AI because, as the story goes that, your wife had a bit of a medical emergency and you couldn't find the document.
Right.
So you started Sorted AI so people can organize documents, and the scanning was a use case that picked up, right? What are some other interesting use cases that you're looking to explore and build out?
So when I started, as you rightly said, there was this medical emergency, and I was not in the country. My wife had no clue about the documents. And that's when I thought I need to organize this stuff better. And to do that, I started looking for products. But what I realized was it takes a lot of discipline for productivity tools to work for you. And like the way productivity tools have been developed so far, it takes a lot of effort upfront for you to make it work for yourself. Be it a notes application, be it a reminders application, be it a document storage, whatever you want to do. Yeah. And that's why I felt, I don't have that kind of motivation. And I mean, it's a boring task. I don't enjoy doing it. So I got to find something which will, make it easy for me. So I just dump my stuff at one place, and it automatically gets organized for me and automatically helps me find the information when I need it. So that's the genesis of the idea of Sorted AI, that how can we leverage artificial intelligence and make it easy for people to manage their documents to start with. And then in a larger picture, manage their information overload in terms of various different things that they're trying to manage. So that's how that's the core thesis with Sorted AI and Kaagaz. Kaagaz now is very focused on making sure that people are able to scan documents. And then what we're going to bring in next is have a cloud storage, so that, as I said, these users do not have another device like you and I have a laptop where you will organize documents properly and do all of that. In a mobile environment, even creating folders is not that straightforward, and organizing your information is not that straightforward. So we see that people are using these scanning apps as a organized storage space on their phone, because here you can create folders, you can properly name the files, search them easily, etc. So how we are seeing it is, the first use case is scanning. You scan the document, you want to share it or keep a digital copy. The second use case is organize that information so that in future you can access it easily. Third comes where the cloud storage comes in, that now you have access to these documents independent of your device. So because phones are something that people change every 2 or 3 years, so they should have a place where their documents are safe even if they've changed the phone or something happens to the phone. So cloud storage comes there. The next use case is, now that the information is sitting there, how do I make that information more useful for the user? Otherwise, it's just a dump. Can that information work for the user? That's where the AI element comes in. That if you've, let's say, uploaded a vehicle insurance document by scanning on Kaagaz and then uploading to Kaagaz storage, the AI engine will be able to identify that this is a vehicle insurance of this particular vehicle number and it's expiring on this particular date. And it will be able to remind you that your insurance is up for renewal. You want to take an action on that. So that's how we are looking at this to evolve and make this information work for the user, so that they can then focus on things that are important, not just worrying about organizing documents, remembering dates, etc., which a machine can do. In terms of our user base right now for Scanner, we have broadly 3 kinds of users. One set is students who are using it for scanning notes, assignments, books, especially in the pandemic scenario where everyone is studying online. This has become a lot more relevant for people. So that's one segment. The other segment is people using it for their work, or personal documents. So scanning agreements and sharing and those kind of things. And third use case is businesses using it to manage their documentation and invoices, etc. Again, the Bharat user who's an individual running his own business, doesn't have a laptop or a desktop really in his day-to-day life, wants to organize this information. You and I do it very easily on our laptops. They don't have a device like that. So for them, it is a scanning app come storage app which is helping them manage that. So that's how we see different use cases right now.
Right. And I think going forward, it might be interesting for you to build out these institutional partnerships as well, right? Like, let's say with banks and so on and so forth, because KYC is a very important thing as well. So you use your PAN card in a bunch of different places and so on and so forth.
I mean, with those partnerships, we could just say that, let's say in future, a bank asks for particular documents, you could just send out one link of Kagaz.
Exactly.
Where all the documents already stored there.
Right. Okay, let's talk about running an app business as such, right? So downloads are one aspect of it, and then engagement is another, and then getting these guys to actually pay for you is a whole other experience, right? You've done the 0 to 1 million journey, so to speak, right? What are your thoughts on scaling this as a business?
So one thing that we've been very conscious about is that these are utility tools, and apps are not something that people pay for generally. I mean, of course, there are certain kinds of apps that people pay for, but for a utility app, people have not paid ever in history as well. Wherever there's a freemium model, it is typically 2-3% of the population of your user base who will eventually take a subscription and pay. But the other interesting part of running an app business is, as compared to an operational business, for example, is your scale is not. Your scalability is doesn't require a lot of cost from your end, so you can continue to scale without having a big team, without having a lot of extra expenses and all. So in that sense, even if a 3 to 4% user base is paying for it, it could create a large business because your scale is very different and your costs are not that high. So if I'm talking about let's say 100 million user base in India using Scanner, and out of that only 2-3%, 4% of them paying, that is 3-4 million users. So that's the interesting part about an app business, that your scale could be the 100 million and above kind of scale. And if you can get some people to pay by making sure that there are enough, enough value created for those power users that they're willing to pay for it, you can create a sizable business out of that. The other aspect is where generally the app businesses make money is advertising. That you have ads on this, and again, if you have eyeballs, if you have a lot of daily active users, then you can make money on the ads business. That's something that we've consciously stayed away from because as a user, I feel ads affect my user experience, and I don't want to have in the product as well. So that's consciously what we have in mind right now, that we don't want to do ads. We want to make sure that as a user, it should be a seamless experience. And we look at adding value to the users in different ways, and then ask them for money. And even if not everyone is going to pay for it, it's fine. The business is like that. So the AI elements that we are working on, which will make it much easier for people to manage their information, get more out of that information. There'll be certain elements of it that will come free. There'll be certain elements that will come part of a subscription. And along with that, we have a bunch of other ideas where we could help users manage their day-to-day tasks using these products, the ones that we plan to have in future as well. Look at monetizing on that. But yeah, and that's definitely, as you rightly said, is going to be an interesting journey. How do we monetize? Getting users is the first step, and we are running a business. We need to figure out how to make money as well. So
sure, yeah. To quote the social network, ads are uncool, right? Yeah. So let's not, I hope you don't go down that route. a major part of your business also is the fact that, Play Store is a gatekeeper, right? I mean, they're a key cog in this entire wheel as such. How do you kind of view them? I mean, you mentioned shipping updates every 3 days or every 10 days.
Right.
I noticed you guys are not on the App Store, right? I mean, you're not on the Apple App Store. Yeah,
Not there.
yeah. So that's a whole other experience, But Play Store is, I would say, relatively better. But then,
Right.
considering that you're running an agile business, considering that you're so nimble, how do you view this, right? I mean, whether it is getting your updates approved or the fact that they may mandate a certain amount of their fees of your fees to be paid to them, and so on and so forth. How do you view them?
So, like, I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately. I mean, that's how monopolies work. I mean, that's a monopoly that they've created there. That this is a app store, and every developer wants to be on the Play Store or on the App Store because it brings them users. Distribution is one of the biggest thing in any tech business, especially if you're building an app. The distribution is key, and these platforms get you the distribution. Any small developer could get a distribution just by putting up their app onto Play Store and doing some things right there. So that is definitely a huge value add that they bring in, and for that they are charging whatever they are charging. Is it fair or not? As a business myself, I would say, I mean, it's an unfair, that 30% of my earnings I have to give it to them. From their perspective, I mean, that's a great business to be in. I mean, you are sitting on such an amazing platform that people want to still come to you. Given that we are also present on a couple of other app stores for Android, and we do get users from there, and we definitely would, and that's how markets also work. That once someone has created this kind of a monopoly or taking advantage in that sense, there'll be people who will come up with alternatives, and if they're good,
Exactly,
people will switch to them. So we are seeing it that way, that this is a market dynamics playing out. If people are not happy with Play Store today, they will create another app store, and we are happy going to that app store as well. And eventually, if we start getting more users from that, I mean, why not? So we see it purely as a market dynamic. The thing that we face a challenge with in the last few months around the updates, etc., has been there, and that's what a lot of people have been talking about. That to get your updates out, it takes sometimes even 10 days to you've rolled out an update, but 10 days still going on to get that rolled out to the users. That's a problem. Though, from the perspective, if you're going to charge me 30% and all of that, and not give me a service in relation to that, then there is a problem. So again, I see it as market dynamics playing out, and a lot of talk around an Indian app store to be there.
Exactly.
We'll definitely be supporting that idea and get onto that, not just because of the idea of Play Store playing the monopoly card there, but also from the perspective of the kind of user base that we are targeting, which is the Bharat user, and a lot of products are being built for that user. That user doesn't have an email ID also. They work on mobile phone and phone number and OTP flow for all apps, but Play Store requires an email ID. So they either have to take their son or daughter's email ID or create one email ID which they'll forget after that. So there is a requirement for a Play Store or an app store basically, which is built for that user segment, works for those flows, those UX flows that are there, and we would be happy being part of that.
No, I don't think anyone has a problem with the guardrails per se, right? I mean, obviously, you are using apps on your phone. You would want the security to be, security or data privacy to be top notch. Obviously, all that, right? And of course, App Store lends itself to distribution as well. Going from 0 to 1 million downloads would not be possible otherwise. So I don't think anyone has a problem with the guardrails or the fact that you have to pay something to be part of this ecosystem. I think what they have a problem is with very opaque processes,
Right.
I mean, not enough customer service per se, right?
Right.
And just randomness, right? I mean, whether in terms of the ranking or whether in terms of, when something is going to happen,
Absolutely. The black box is a problem. I mean, if you write to them, you're practically talking to a wall.
you're talking to a wall.
You
Yeah,
know when you get the response,
yeah,
what response you will get.
yeah,
That's something and that's where I see that market dynamics will play out, and someone
yeah,
will do a better job at the customer service and transparency around that, and people will start moving to that. The benefit Google has with the Play Store is that they also have Android, so it is a default that they can get. But there are other phone manufacturers who are giving other app stores as default on their phones, and that's something that can get you distribution also
yeah.
quickly.
No, we're at a point, I think, where the amount of power has been super concentrated in two places, right? And I think there will be some kind of a dismantling of this.
Right.
I think Google itself will kind of expect this. I think if they are more proactive, I think it'll be more helpful for them, I would say, right? Yeah. So one of the final things I want to talk to you about is this whole AI element, right? I mean, people joke that there's more AI in decks and presentations than in products, right? But I would think of it as a key differentiator for, not just from a product perspective, but even from a nation's perspective. Like if you look at the investments China has made in AI for the last 20 years, cornering every person who's researching in the subject, building indigenous technologies, and so on and so forth, right? How do you see that AI element? How do you see some real use cases developing in India for AI?
So you're right that the word is more abused or like not properly used right now. It is just being thrown away in decks and everywhere where people talk. And in that sense, it's okay. I mean, that happens with every new thing that comes, that everyone wants to get associated with it because it is cool and it gets you that audience initially. But the important part is that we understand the importance of AI and that it is going to create a lot of value in different fields. I mean, it's not something that is limited only to a particular field. This is how software changed, all industries. AI is also going to affect everything from healthcare to auto sector to apps, and all kinds of businesses are getting affected by AI and getting improved by AI. So I see that as a huge, opportunity there for Indian entrepreneurs to focus on that. We have got the kind of talent that is required to build out these, and if and a lot of use cases also around that that we can build out here in India itself. I mean, one of the challenges that people face with building any kind of AI powered thing is having a lot of data upfront to train your models on. And if you're solving a very India focused problem, or let's say a lot of work being done in agriculture, a lot of work being done in healthcare where AI is adding a lot of value, and there the data is abundantly available in India. Of course, it's not in the proper usable format, which is what the startups are right now focused on, but it is available. It's not something that you can't do here in India, and that's where people are focusing. So there are a lot of things that will have a huge value add coming from AI. And like one of the things that we internally talk about, and one of the things that we feel the larger vision for any AI product should be, is human brain is meant for creative thinking and doing something which is value adding, not just mundane tasks which machines can take care of. The idea of software was that, and the idea of AI should be that only, that it should take away the mundane tasks, the tasks that can be standardized, can be made done by the machines, so that we can focus on things which machines cannot do, and make sure that the human brain capacity is used towards that direction. Right. And if adds anything, even a small thing here and there, if it makes some job easy for someone, and they can focus, I mean, just focus on having a better life. I mean, having time for yourself. If AI can help you that, I mean, it's great. It's a great outcome that will come.
Yeah. No, in my perspective, I think it's key in hiding the complexity. I mean, it's a sort of a unintuitive thing to think about, but I think AI is very, very key in hiding that complexity, right? In having that engine, so powerful under the hood that I mean, it feels almost so natural, right? Like speaking
Right.
something into being,
Right.
things to that effect. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So I think, yeah, I mean, a lot of fascinating opportunities and huge potential in
Yeah.
the future. Yeah, so this has been a fascinating conversation, Snehanshu. Thank you so much for spending time with us and
Enjoyed
explaining
it.
various facets. Anything that you want to leave us with, your plans for the future, and so on?
I mean, I enjoyed the conversation, Roshan, and I mean, this is one of the very different conversations that I've had, very focused on certain aspects, and I enjoyed talking to you. In terms of how we plan to go, as I said, we are right now focused on making sure that we build the best scanner that anyone can have, not just in India, globally. It should be a product that people love doing. And the interesting part about building for Indian user is that if you've built for an Indian user, you solve for so many constraints that for others it'll anyway work for.
Right. Low
So-
battery, poor network.
Yeah. If you build for that, those kind of constraints, it's going to be something that will work for a lot of other people as well. So we want to focus on building products from India for the world. Of course, the first user always will be Indian users and the Bharat user, and a bunch of things in plans. So people who have not tried Kagas should try it and let us know what they feel about it.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks so much, man. This was so much fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Bye.
Bye.